Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today, we're joined by my good friend, Hallie Bregman, Head of People Analytics at PTC. Welcome to the show, Hallie. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Thank you for joining us before your staycation begins.
That's right.
I'm pretty jealous that this is your last day until you leave. So excited to have some time off?
Get a few days off. Absolutely. Need a change of scenery after all of the quarantining we've been doing.
It's like getting out of the house and of work because they're both in the same place.
That is right.
It'd be nice. Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about yourself, your journey, which is a pretty cool one, to where we are today and how you ended up at PTC.
Yeah, so Hallie Bregman, I am joining now the head of people analytics at PTC, but have a pretty non-traditional background. So started my career as a child psychologist, got a PhD in clinical psychology, but was always really a researcher into data. Statistics was kind of known as the stats nerd, the person people would come to for help all the way back to grad school. And I thought back then I'd go into academia. Then I wrote my first grant. And I decided I was never going to do that again. And so academia was out after that.
No one tells you about that going in, do they?
No one told me about that. The stress. And I give credit to the folks who do this day in and day out to get their funding, to keep their keep their careers, have research. It's crazy, the amount of pressure and the government ebbs and flows around the funding environment. It wasn't for me, but I still really liked the research and data analysis and understanding. But I also was always a fast thinker. I've always just been somebody who likes speed, and academia is also not fast, right? That the ivory tower, it's out of reach to get peer reviewed and published. Takes by the time your research gets published, it's 2-3 years later. Quickly was like, okay, what else am I going to do? Really knew I liked stats, and so ultimately after graduate school, landed at a startup that was lucky enough to use the same software that I knew from psychology, which was called SPSS, IBM's enterprise software, back in the days when we used enterprise software for analytics. Mm-hmm. And landed at this 10-person startup doing market research for consumer packaged goods companies, and loved it. Realized the space was super interesting, technology, innovation, marketing and customers. And so realized there was still really a human component to that, right? The customers, the shoppers. Jumped to a couple of different startups, really liked that environment. The small, I learned a lot, especially coming out of psychology and academia, where I didn't really know what industry was, right? The buzzword at the time, I'd be like, I'm going to go into industry. And everybody around me would be like, what is that? And I'd be like,
what industry?
Right? It's just this thing that is not academia. And I'm not going to go be a clinician where I'm, sitting and doing therapy hours and hours. So that was all I knew. Mm-hmm. And so really, really lucked out and, enjoyed getting more and more technical as I moved from company to company. I, picked up R and Python. I started, realizing that
when you pick that up, it's not as easy as that, though, right? You can't just throw that about and be like, just picked up R and Python.
Right. Well,
someone who's tried like myself, I'm like that. I just fail miserably, and I've just given up at this point. So
it's true. I realized that what I was doing wasn't that different. So it was really just translating it to a new language, right?
Oh, okay.
As we called it syntax. And I realized later that was basically code.
Okay.
And so that was kind of my early days. But then it was also right around the time that Coursera and edX were popping up, this, MOOCs, the idea of open learning. And I remember I used to take the train to work, and I would watch a video or 2 or 3 or however long my commute took. And it was great because they were, 5-7 minute videos. So I could just watch however many fit into my commute. And there were like exercises to do online. I didn't always do those, but I just kept watching and learning. Ultimately, I was at a weather analytics startup, which was my foray into something.
Weather analytics.
Weather analytics. It did not involve people. And I realized very quickly that I needed people. There needed to be some human.
Both sides. Yeah.
But while I was there, I had a colleague who only knew Python. And at the time, I was coding in R. And R at the time also was much better than Python for like data science and analytics. It was really, the background of R was for statistics. Python was a general purpose language. And so But this colleague only knew Python and I'd been wanting to learn it. And so I just put down R and I've actually never picked it up again. And I literally the next day downloaded Python and I started working in Python. And it took a couple of weeks of bugging him every few minutes and saying, well, how do you do this?
And how do you to learn though, right? When you have someone, oh man, it's so hard trying to do it the other way around. Like I've done it like yourself through like YouTube videos or online, like step by step where I'm literally watching a video and doing it at the same time. Like it's the best way to learn.
But I find the exercises that come with a lot of those videos, like the Coursera things, are like out of the context. So you're like practicing this, so you have some idea. When you actually apply it at work, I tell people the best way they can learn is to take something they already know how to do, something they built in Excel, you know, can be simple, and literally do the exact same thing and try to get the exact same results in Python or whatever language.
Yeah, at least where you know where you're going, there's a clear goal destination.
Exactly. And there's a context, you understand it.
Yeah.
Just like, I'm not just, you know, learning how to do a loop just for the sake of doing a loop. I'm doing a loop to achieve some goal. So, so yeah, from then it was, you know, I kind of never looked back. I moved from that weather analytics startup to Wayfair, where I started on our data science team working on product and customer personalization, did a lot of customer segmentation type work, and then kind of got to a place where I was like, okay, I want more. I want to learn more about the business. I want to understand kind of breadth. And that's always really been my MO, is I like to know a little about a lot of things, right? I've got some specializations. I'm a big fan of kind of understanding the big picture. And so I actually then moved into a marketing role, right? So I've kind of, you know, started as a psychologist, data science. Then I'm in marketing, working on our credit cards and our loyalty programs. But again, bringing all the data back together to help the program managers really run their programs in a way that they could, you know, understand what their customers were doing. We knew where to double click, and got really to understand like what it meant to run a, you know, mini business within the larger business, have ownership for a P&L.
You sound like me as well, by the way, because I always try to describe myself to everyone else of like, you're going to get to a point where you go in that particular role or learn that new thing, and you get to a point where you some level of mastery, and then you get bored.
Exactly.
And then you're like, what's next? As I completely get it.
I think thinking all the way back to grad school, like the idea of academia was appealing to me originally because I'm a lifelong learner, right? I've always loved to learn. And I think that's actually what I've brought to my career in industry, right? To go back to my buzzword, but was that I love to learn. And so I like moving into new fields. But had people analytics been in existence when I started my career, I joke I probably would have gone straight there. And it's probably good that I didn't, because I got all of this kind of roundabout experience. But
I think it's better, to be honest, Haley, because now you've got more of an understanding of the business. You've worked on a product team, you've worked in the marketing team. You truly, there's one thing reading about it, but there's actually another thing actually working in it, reading it, you know, interacting with those teams, those customers. And then now moving into this people analytics role, you have a real understanding of the organization. And
it's been so helpful having that understanding, because especially I moved within Wayfair originally into their people analytics team.
Was that a brand new team as well, right? Is they just build that and bring you in? Or
it was about a year old when I joined it. I founded the diversity analytics group within the broader team. But also what I was really responsible was transforming the technology stack that folks were using. So when I joined the team, it was everybody pulled a report from Workday and did an analysis in an Excel. They ran
here's a graph we made.
And then they manually sent it out. And I got there and I was like, okay, one, we need a SQL server, right? We need some way to scale data, to bring it in from our ATS, to bring it in from, you know, our AHS systems and all of these other systems that we're working with, and put it together so we can connect it to tell stories. Because you can't tell the story of quality of hire if you don't know what their performance was after they were hired. You know, we're all of these different kind of components, the questions we're trying to answer. Instead of being a simple reporting function, really turned that broader team into a analytics function. At the same time, got everyone working in Python. And because there was so much more power, we started doing natural language processing projects, some really, really cool work there, evaluating performance and competencies, and also equity and how words are used differently for different populations. Some really, really neat stuff. And so from there, kind of grew that team, and then was like, what's next? And there was
it's a common theme here. There's a common theme here, Haley, on this podcast.
And I'll say I was in the midst of bringing in Visier there, which I'm actually doing at PTC as well.
You're bringing in Visio now. There's everyone, that's like every people analytics person I'm speaking to every day is bringing in Visier.
Well, and I can tell you the whole PTC story in a minute, but it's a really great tool, and especially for speed and value. So this company called Toast approached me, and right as I was starting to get a little antsy, and they were like, "We want to build a people analytics team," and I was like, "Great!" They had a really, really strong employer brand in the Boston area. They were hot. They basically built restaurant point of sale software, and it was really innovative. It was really catching on. They were growing tons and tons and tons. In fact, February 14th, so Valentine's Day, they announced a raise of $400 million at a $5 billion valuation. So really, really strong. And 6 weeks later, they laid off half the company after COVID shut down all restaurants.
So sad. When you first told me that, I was just like heartbroken for them.
I was too.
You just joined, right? It was like a month in?
10 weeks I worked there.
10 weeks.
I'm a cheerleader from the outside now, and I hope I'm really able to rebound, because it was just a really, really cool company. I imagine it to be one of the, future pillar companies of Boston. But, 1,500 people they laid off, and it was real sad. It was hard. And so I had a very eventful COVID, no doubt, because here I was, had just started this new job, was just settling in and getting to know the people and the stakeholders. And then I was back on the market, right? I was, what now? And I had, frankly, a lot of worry around having to just take a job just to take a job, right? And not find a job that was a passion point or a career. And I'd always worked in these hyper-growth startups. This was kind of my niche. And that's when Jill Larson came along, and she had just joined PTC as the new chief people officer. And for those who know Jill, she's
a powerhouse. She is always amazing.
I have no other words. She is phenomenal, and she is really taking the bull by the horns and rebuilding the entire people function at PTC. And so here I actually got this new opportunity, again, a learning opportunity to join a mature organization. PTC is 35 years old, but really be in a very strong build phase. So the thing I like the most, the transformation, really rebuilding the people team from the ground up. And so got really lucky, because this is certainly not just a job because I needed a job. This is a job that I love already. It's been 4 months, and I see myself here for a very long time.
Cool. Wow. How was it this is a good thing I'd love to ask you actually. What was your experience being onboarded virtually during COVID? And you've still not met your team out, have you?
I have not. I actually, next week, I am going into the office for one day. Our Boston office is open. About 10 people a day have been going in, from what I've been told. So pretty slim, but I'm going to go in with a few of my team members just to meet each other. I've never seen them. I don't have a badge. I feel like a fake employee. I'm like, I need a badge with my picture and my name and says PTC on it. And to see the office. So no, I describe my coworkers as bobbleheads. Nobody has a body. I don't know how tall anyone is.
Oh yeah. Cool.
So literally, I just talk to them on screen. So a lot of people have asked me the question about, what's it like being onboarded remotely? And frankly, I had a actually really great experience. And part of that is because Jill brought in a whole suite of new leadership to PTC. And that means I was not the only one who was new. And I think that actually is a really important point, because I think it would have been much harder if everybody was there, everybody knew each other, everybody knew the culture, and I was just the only one kind of, out
new kid on the block.
But as a result of there were like 15 of us who are new. And so we all are getting to know everything. We're all kind of in the same situation. It really felt like a cohort. I don't think you get that often at this stage in your career. And I feel like that's really what Jill actually fostered by bringing in so many folks around the same time. So I've had a great experience. I feel very connected to my colleagues, despite the fact that I've never met them. I actually learned a whole bunch of interesting things in onboarding, particularly that I filled out this really nice stack of paper on board, which just showed the opportunity that PTC has in order to bring digital transformation.
You're like, see the stack of paper? This is not going to be here in a few months.
Right. So you knew, you kind of talking to Jill, you knew where things were. It was very much a operationally focused organization. How were we going to, use technology, bring data? It never had people analytics before, and sure enough, there I was filling out 50 pieces of paper, writing my name. I was like, I haven't done this ever, maybe, but we will change that. That is the journey we're on.
Just to give everyone a bit context about the PTC, because they came out of nowhere, but essentially they've been around for how long?
PTC's been around 35 years.
They're like the 35-year-old startup. I think people will keep describing it as.
Yes. It's a growth. I think there's a lot of transformation, and it's definitely does not feel like a old fuddy-duddy company, right? It's growth is a big part of our mission.
Mm-hmm. And especially the space that you're operating in is super exciting, right? Couldn't be more exciting.
And it couldn't be more relevant, especially with what we're going through. I mean, one of our products is around virtual training, right? Using, the cool goggles, the virtual reality.
Yeah.
If you think about, so we work a lot with companies in industrial manufacturing. And if you think about frontline workers, the folks who are on the ground doing the job, that's an industry that actually, or a role that turns over at a fairly high rate. And so is expensive to onboard and train. And to train folks, you've got to have somebody, in the warehouse with them.
Physically there.
Right? Physically there. But we have technology that literally lets your trainer be, a million miles away with their goggles on, with your goggles on, and see exactly where you're at. And we have this product called Visio Chalk, where you can actually draw on something and it sticks, right? So somebody can say, oh, this is the part you're supposed to turn next. And they don't have to be like, oh, that little thing over to the left that's kind of gray and kind of brown. Like, nope, they just draw a circle and you can see it, and you can actually, do the job, and train in much bigger scale, much more. And so particularly right now where we don't want to be near each other, that's especially relevant technology.
Yeah, it's super interesting. We actually have some VR headsets in the office because we're all massive geeks here.
Yeah.
And the amount of times that I've just kind of got lost in VR. I end up walking into the other day. This isn't pretty embarrassing to say on LinkedIn Live, but I was, we was on the VR headsets in the office, and there's a virtual desk with like a computer on it, and I forgot that it was virtual, and I put my hand down and I fell over. Because you get so engrossed in it, right? So I put my hand down, and it just went straight over and fell on the floor. And he was like, "What's wrong with you?" I was like, "I literally thought there was a real desk."
I thought there was a desk.
So, super interesting opportunities. How established was the people analytics team in PTC? Are you building it from scratch, or what does it look like? If so, give us an idea what the priorities are for the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, so scratch. In fact, I'd say negative scratch, right? So there has never been people analytics before at PTC.
Okay.
So I joined. I have one senior analyst right now helping support me, Marcus Baker. He's great. The joke I make is every other company I've joined, you join and people are like, I want predictive turnover, right? Everybody wants to know who's going to leave.
The Holy Grail.
It's like the Holy Grail. And I have lots of thoughts on whether that's a useful model or anyhow. But at PTC, literally everybody the first couple of weeks was like, I want turnover. And I was like, just turnover? And they were like, just turnover. And I was like, okay, this is where we're at. So we are, early days, getting some of the basic reporting, right? The dreaded word that people analytics hates, reporting. But really, that's where this company's at. And so a big part of my role is not just analytics, but is actually change management. And so a lot of what I will do over the next 6 to 12 months, and what I've been starting to do, is partnering with folks to help them understand, one, what data is, the value of data. 2, how to ask a question that you can answer with data. And then 3, not to hyper-focus on the number, but to be really interested in the insight and the story. So I spend a lot of my time saying, no, you don't need to care about this number, right? Yeah. But the story is that this is the movement we're seeing, and here are the actions that can come out of that. And so a big part of my journey is really getting folks' mindset around how to ask the question and how to actually leverage people analytics.
Yeah. Is that the advice, if I was going to ask you, what would your advice be for people that are new building a HR analytics function? Would that be one of your main key pieces of advice then?
So yes and no, because I think it's very company specific. Now, coming from Wayfair and Toast, these were very data savvy organizations. And these were folks who were really comfortable with this kind of thought process. So I think the culture is very different at PTC. And I think you'll find companies like PTC and other companies probably like, like Wayfair. I was talking to someone from Capital One earlier this week on their people analytics team, and a lot of similarities to Wayfair. PTC is not there in terms of the data usage, right? So it's a technology company. There's lots of innovation. There's lots of really cool products, but people really aren't used to looking at data and thinking about their employees and decisions in this way. I really think about data democratization as one of the key tenets of what I need to do. And that is why Visier is so interesting to me, because it gives me the ability to give data out to everybody in the organization, control it, so have governance, better governance, but still that transparency. So people are used to seeing, digesting, having that one-stop shop where they can go and get all the nuggets and insights about their employee team so that they can go back and manage them themselves. That, they don't need to have me as a roadblock.
Why Visier, by the way, over the competition? What stands out about them over the rest?
Yeah, so I brought in Visier to Wayfair first. Before we did that, we were going to build it ourselves. And we were going to do the Tableau, and a lot of people do this. I have many colleagues who have built some kind of, they build out all of the dashboards themselves. And that's what we're used to in the customer space, I think. It's certainly what we did at Wayfair and many other companies, Toast. But people data is so different, right? So one, it needs security and governance. And that is hard. And a lot of these off-the-shelf BI tools, your Tableau, Looker, whatever, Click, are great BI tools, but they are not built for HR data. So they don't have that really, really strong security and governance model built in. And so that was one of the big wins for Visier. The other thing is time to value. So I get hundreds of visualizations to light up very, very quickly. And so me as a new people analytics leader, Marcus and I could build a whole bunch of dashboards, right? It would probably take us years and we wouldn't be able to answer all the questions, and everybody would have follow-ups they wouldn't be able to answer. Visier is a lot like, I think about Looker as, one of the kind of trailblazers in the BI space these days, where there's data exploration. Visier is the same thing, where you can really double click in and get down to details. And that's really important because for someone like my HRBPs, they're not going to use the data if they have to go back to another system to get to individual details. But I'm certainly not going to give folks outside of my HRBPs individual detail access. They can have aggregate access. So here I've got this one place where I can have all this information. I can handle multiple different user roles. And there's some other competitors out there that are starting to do this well. Where I think Visier really differentiates is in the UI. And for a company that is not super adept at data digestion, understanding how to use the data, I think that UI piece is critical in getting them to adopt the tool.
Yeah. I think that's where a lot of products go wrong.
100%.
all of the power behind it, but unless it's in a user experience is there, then you've lost.
There's another great tool out there that I really, really loved, probably better as an analyst for me to use, but I just didn't think it would be nearly as strong for the business stakeholders, for the HRBPs, for the folks that I need to consume the data. I can handle, whatever, but I need them to adopt it for my function to be successful.
What would you say the biggest challenges in terms of building a people analytics function that you come across? Obviously, you've done it in multiple companies now. You've been part of teams.
Yeah.
What are the common roadblocks or mistakes that companies make when building a people analytics function?
One, people jump right to the sexy stuff. They ignore the building blocks. And the building blocks are most fundamentally good data. So what is often said, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
That's fallen into this space, but that is so true. And it's one of the things I'm spending a lot of my time right now at PTC auditing our data, because I'm like, why is this person tagged one way in this place and then as another field that are completely discrepant, right? And so if my data is not good, it doesn't matter what systems I have, it doesn't matter how I visualize it, it is wrong. I think about internal transfers. This is something that a lot of companies are starting to talk about as we think about internal mobility, reskilling, upskilling. It's the career jungle gym, right? The thing I've done multiple times is, move internally. How do you capture that, right, in your systems. A lot of these systems were not designed in this way. Is it a new requisition that lives in your ATS and then you fill it and you're or is it a designation in your HRS? It could be both. How does it all talk to each other? And a lot of folks have built out and rolled out these programs. I've seen this at now multiple organizations without thinking about how the data actually captures that information. And then everybody wants to understand, what does internal mobility mean? Does it mean people staying longer? Does it mean people are happier? Whatever, and you can't answer it because I don't even know who was an internal transfer, especially when reorgs are going on every 5 minutes, which is very common, right, in all of these organizations, especially in growth organizations. We're like, oh, now this team's over here. Now this team's over here.
And so no way of tracking it whatsoever.
Right. I'm like, was this a reorg or was this a transfer? Like, how do I know that person moved on their own will? So I don't know. So that's the kind of thing that I'm really thinking heavily about right now, is putting into place like the guardrails so that every system we bring in, and we're bringing in a lot of new systems to PTC. We're in a place where we're thinking heavily about digital technology and how we can improve all of our experiences, rewards and recognition, surveys, et cetera. And really, with each tool we bring in, my job is to go in and say, how are we getting that data out and what does it look like? You're talking about this tier structure. What does that actually look like? Because I will never be able to measure it for you if it is not designated cleanly and clearly. Similarly, recruiting is always the hardest one, right? We always want good recruiting data, and recruiters' biggest, headache is all of the inputs they have to put into the system. And so how can we make that as simple, as easy as possible, while still maintaining adherence so that we get the data to tell the story? So I think the hardest thing is what's oftentimes out of the control of the people analytics team. It's not the cool analyses. It's not the systems. It's the processes to get the data right.
What about first hires then? If you're building, who's doing that job? Because obviously it takes, obviously it's you and your colleague. Sorry, apologies if I got his name.
Marcus, yep.
I can't remember. But what kind of skills do you feel like you need to hire ahead of people analytics straight away? Or can you have maybe assign someone in the team to start doing some of this work? Or is it very much specialist, so you kind of need...
I think you need the strategic thought behind it, right? Because you're never going to do it all. So you have to be able to say what's important, where are we going as a company, and what are the principles that ultimately we're going to need to measure. Well, I think you need a jack of all trades, right? You don't really want...
That's what I meant by that, by the way, because I noticed a lot of the heads of people analytics I'm speaking to, they are a jack of all trades. They're not... Yes. Yeah. Right.
And so I think about myself, I think about certain colleagues, right? Data science backgrounds, the folks who are super technical. You've got some really, really cool people out there. Again, I love natural language processing. It's one of my favorite tools to use on people data. And I know some really, really great folks who can do it. I don't need them right now, right? I need people who can literally wrangle something over here and then do a regression over here and then pull in some other data and evaluate.
It's almost like a startup environment.
It's like a startup. I mean, we're very much like a startup. And that is very much the role that Marcus plays for me right now, where we are just, he'll do anything I throw at him. And that's really what you need. So my first hire 100% would always be that jack of all trades. Okay. I think over time, I envision our team to ultimately organize kind of aligned with the business units with some key specialists who kind of go across all of those threads. And I do think data science is one of those, right? I also think engagement, somebody, a survey specialist is one of those. Engagement also often is part of people analytics. It's a key data source.
Surveys, and with everyone remote now.
And with everyone remote now, it's one of the key ways we hear people voice. And then I think you've also, I talk about getting aligned with the business units. I think it's really important to have somebody who can say, R&D or sales, what's going on for you right now? What are the questions you're thinking about? At the same time, I think you always need someone who can keep that high level view to pull the threads all together.
But that's you, right? That's you, right?
That's me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. It's kind of like the CEO role.
Yeah.
Or,
I like that. I'm the CEO.
You're the CEO, right? CEO of people analytics, right?
Yeah, you got
it. The role of the future.
Yeah.
How do you build a foundation whilst balancing delivering on business objectives?
I am a builder, right? And so this is actually what I love. I would probably hate going into a mature organization where we could just start doing some really cool analytics right away. But like the platform's all there, everybody's used to it, everybody's adopted it. I'd be like, okay, somewhere else next, right? Like there's cool things, and there's lots of great people who thrive in those kind of environments. And I am glad that's not me. I think
you've all realized that listening by now.
Yeah, I like the scrappiness. I like the change, right? And so how do I deliver on business objectives? Again, I'm telling you where the business is today is very early.
The objective.
Very early on the journey. So right now the questions are around representation, right? As Black Lives Matter is kind of, in the headlines, and we're thinking about representation. It's around, how do I help them tell a story with some of these simple numers? So if I take, for instance, who works here, who are we hiring, and who's leaving? These are 3 data points I can get today. Okay. I can start to say, hey, we are hiring, I don't know, at a higher rate. We're hiring Black people at a higher rate. We're losing them at a higher rate too, though. So if we keep hiring at this rate, that's great. They're here, and then falling out the bottom, right? So there's
why is that?
Bucket. So very quickly, I could direct the focus to programs around, not around hiring, because we're doing good there, but around leaving, around staying, around the culture, the internal piece. On the other hand, you might see hiring's low and leaving is lower, or at least the same as the rest of the company. That would make me say, okay, the place we really need to focus is on hiring. And we've got to start at the top of the funnel, or maybe it's in between, in interview stages is where we're seeing some discrepancy as well, right? So it doesn't always require really complex data, really complex stories, really complex analysis to be really effective. I'm talking about headcount and leaving. These are the basics of basics. So I think there's a lot.
Even then, if you don't have the data to support those.
Right.
Tell me about a project that you kind of led that you're most passionate about. I think you mentioned when we first spoke, did the sort of diversity function at Wayfair.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit more about that. What was sort of the why behind it, and tell me the sort of the journey you took and the end results.
Yeah, so I've always had a passion for inclusion. I think back to college. I remember my first semester, I took a women's studies course because it was we have like these breadth requirements. You had to take, some science, some math, whatever. And I took this women's studies course, and I was like, oh, I like this. And so I immediately declared a women's studies minor. And I took all of these courses, and I thought this was super interesting. And then I was, a part of the feminist club on campus. There were all these opportunities. And then I left, and it was kind of like, okay, what do I do with this? And then I went to grad school, and I ended up doing my dissertation on sexual minority youth and their experience coming out to their parents. And so here I was again, working with an underrepresented population and thinking about the rights of folks and the differences in experiences. So it's kind of followed me around. And I was at Wayfair talking about joining the people analytics team. We're like, oh, we could work on teams. We could work on this. We could work on that. We could work on diversity. And I was like, I'm doing that. Yeah. And they were like, oh, I don't know if it's a whole role. And I was like, oh, it's more than a whole role. It's a whole team. And I did end up building a team around it. It was a huge focus area, and it was laying the foundation, but then it was getting into some really cool insights. So it's just something I've always been super passionate about. And I think that passion translated to like really innovative thinking. And so one of the coolest projects that we did this with the support of one of the analysts on the team, was look at performance reviews, right? So managers write these volumes and volumes of text about their employees. Wayfair has a big performance process. Boil it down to a rating, and then we put the rating in the system, right? And so you, Chris, are meets expectations. Doesn't matter. All of this text that your manager just wrote about you're just meets expectations. That's all you are. You're the single dimension.
So you do all of that, and then it ends with just meets expectations. It's like, oh, that's great.
I was like, we're losing out on all of this richness of data, text. People talk about unstructured data and qualitative. But there's just as much good stuff. There's more good stuff in there half the time. And so I had this hypothesis that the language used to describe men and women would be different. And so we actually went in using natural language processing, bag of words, and were able to find some words that were much more often used to describe weaknesses for women. Confidence, right? Confidence is a word we talk about a lot, but there it was, like in plain sight, validating that we've got differences here. And so that was huge, and actually started a lot of work around the language we use in our competencies needs to be more gender neutral, and not just gender, but that was the particular focus of this study. And then we need ways to catch these kinds of sentiments along the way. So we started sending neutral talent calibrators. So Wayfair has calibration sessions where folks get together and kind of discuss ratings. And so there was always a neutral person from the talent team who'd been trained on how to call out, hey, actually that word rock star, it's a gendered word, right? It's most commonly used to describe men. Ninja, right? All these words that are common in tech, we say that you're a ninja, whatever. And these are words we actually don't want to use to describe. Can you tell us more about what you're trying to say? And so try to get into the root of confidence. Well, what does confidence mean? Does it mean presence? Does it mean presenting facts like they're wrong?
This could be a lot of different, yeah.
There's a lot of different, right? It's just kind of like a catch-all bucket. So that really started this.
What does that really mean? What do you mean? Yes, true. Yeah.
Exactly. Around how can we actually get into this? And so had we not done that project, I think we probably would have just kept going on how we were going.
What was the kind of outcome of that then?
There it was in plain sight. It's a lot of times people feel like this is unconscious bias. They don't, it's not explicit, but there it was in writing. And so people really took it seriously, and it started a number of these different programs to help facilitate, and it will now be measured, every cycle.
Okay.
Getting better.
You can literally measure it. Is it getting better?
Is it getting better? Exactly.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
And what did you use to do that? What tools did you use to measure that?
Python.
Okay. I don't know why I asked that question.
Yeah. So there's a couple of natural language processing packages within Python, NLTK and Spacie, that really have the built-in tools to help do this stuff.
You've mentioned on a number of occasions that you've come from different parts of the organization to where you are, right? And I'm sure there's many people within PTC that you perhaps may be looking at that could perhaps come work at you at some point. Do you think most organizations tap into that talent, or they just kind of goes unlooked? You've got all these incredible leaders that are working in the customer service team, that are working in the product team, et cetera, finance team. And I know a number of people analytics executives that I speak to that worked in finance.
Yep.
Now they're VPs, heads of people analytics. Never expected to be in that role. You think sort of loads of untapped talent there?
Yeah, I think there really is. And I actually think it's all about the branding of people analytics. So having differentiated ourselves from just general data science, the folks who are going to data science programs, so when I have been in hiring positions, I've been like, okay, especially at Wayfair, I wanted some of this really technical talent. And so I went to our data science team, and everybody was like, people analytics, right? It didn't have the same
oh, really? Oh, okay.
So internally, I think there's a really great people analytics network, right? There's a bubble of us. We know it. We think it's a really cool field. We're doing really innovative stuff. It doesn't have the same branding outside to general analytics folks, particularly data science, because that data science title is very, very buzzy and very, very sexy and very, very trendy. And all these universities have started data science programs, and people are studying it. Then they come out and they don't want to go be called a people analyst, right? The word analyst actually often is kind of looked inferior upon compared to data scientists. And so I oftentimes, when I actually have written job postings before, I will call it people analytics, data science. I try to get in other buzzwords to help.
I was also going to ask you, what is your advice for people who are trying to attract that talent then?
Literally, I think it's for the roles that are particularly technical. And I don't think all the people analytics roles, right, there's a place for lots of people. I just told you, I wouldn't have hired, a super technician on day one. But I do think we need to do a better job of attracting some of these kind of alternate career paths or other populations. So.
Mm-hmm. And one of the ways you do that is what you just said, is using the language that as someone in the same thing would react to and relate to.
And I know when I go search for a job and I go on LinkedIn or I go on whatever, Indeed, I'm searching data scientist. And so if my job posting doesn't have that word, it's not even going to show up to folks. So I
think it's good to have role models as well, right? Like yourself, that they can see. It'd be great if you, for example, were hiring for you personally, and it'd be great to see you do this when you grow the team, is do a LinkedIn post on video saying, hi, I'm hey, I head up people analytics for you to see, short 3-minute video on LinkedIn, looking for X, Y, and Z people to join the team. And this is my background. Perhaps they're listening to this podcast right now and go, oh, what a really cool. And hearing Hallie's career trajectory and journey, I could see myself doing that.
Yep.
As well. So that could be a cool way of attracting that talent as well. So then I can really relate to you and see that journey. And obviously, clearly you love it. Where you are now. So yeah, it's so interesting because I always say this, but only a few years ago, the role didn't even exist.
It didn't exist.
And now it's like every company I'm speaking to are scrambling to get ahead of people analytics.
Really, it was. I did not have bad times when I got laid off. Very luckily, right?
I know, exactly. You were definitely in demand.
It was very, very lucky. But yeah, it's a hot in demand field, and I think it's really, transforming the way that we think about people.
And as you said, right, it's giving you that sweet spot of the technical side and the people side and the business, right? It kind of brings all of those elements together. So not only are you doing the work, but you're getting to see it through. You see the impact it has on the employees. You see the impact it has on the organization. You definitely would have gotten that as an academic.
Yep.
Many of the academics that I speak to, that's the part they don't like. They don't get to see the work come to fruition and come to life and see the results and follow through on it. And as well, so I definitely think you're in the right place. But look, Hallie, I'm gonna have to let you run at some point. So thank you so much for taking the time out. It was cool that we only connected a few weeks ago, and here we are. So I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're pretty busy right now. Super excited for you. You're gonna be meeting the team next week. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be, you've been working with them for few weeks now, and now you get to say hello face to face. So have fun.
Yeah, thank you.
With the team, and enjoy your time off, and look forward to chatting to you again soon. We'll do like a 6-month catch up. see where you've been and how you're getting on. But for everyone listening, if there's sort of one parting piece of advice for them, what would that be? And then where's the best place they can connect with you if they want to say hello?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's best place to connect for sure. I have focused a lot on trying to post some content in the last year or so, and I think that's fun to always get folks' thoughts on that. Piece of advice, that's a tough one. I honestly, my biggest thing is be yourself, right? Be authentic, because I'm a super transparent person. I will tell you exactly how I think.
We haven't noticed.
And that is, a big part of me and my personal brand. And so I think about the parts of myself that are, benefit me in the workplace. And I think I'm just being myself.
Cool. Well, look, thanks again. I'll let you enjoy the rest of your day and see you again soon. All right.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.